Hello and welcome to the tip of the week. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of helping the marginalized voice speak. And I've recently had some very important learnings around how to work with this in a very skillful way. Um, what we see in our communities and in any system is that there are folks who can very easily find their voice around things, and then there's other people who are very quiet and withdrawn and are not able to find their voice. We also have other folks who have taken their voice back in a very unskillful and perhaps abusive way, not because they're bad people, but because they were pushed to the margins, disempowered, oppressed, and perhaps abused. And so their message can come through in an extremely frustrated manner, and it can be extremely unskillful, and the folks on the receiving end of the message can feel shamed and abused. The difficulty with this is we can't hear somebody when they're shaming us or abusing us. And so it's important that whether the voice, if the voice is a quieter voice, how do we start to draw that voice out so it can feel empowered and it can share its perspective? And for the folks who share their voice in a more abusive or unskillful way, how do we put a halt to the behaviors that are abusive and re-invite their voice back in and re-engage them in a way where their message can be heard? Because perhaps they do have something very important that needs to be said, but because of the delivery, it's very difficult to hear it. So I was in a community a few weeks ago, and I was working with a group, and an elder who is generally tends to be quite abusive in his message, and habitually comes into meetings and basically shuts them down. And I've seen this in almost every community that I travel to, that there are folks who come in to spaces where people in the community are trying to talk and make progress, and the abusive voice comes in and takes the floor and shuts everybody down, and people scatter like ants. And it makes it very difficult. A sense of hopelessness ensues. So it's not a matter of removing that particular voice or getting rid of it, because if we do that, we're just repressing something that's a reality in our system. So in that particular case, as I looked around and as I grappled to find a strategy to respond to this elder, he was an elder that came in, and with all the beliefs in terms of tradition and culture that we hold around respect and hearing from our elders, I was inside of myself grappling with how am I going to approach this. And as I looked around the circle, I could see people's heads hanging down. I could see people becoming very agitated, shaking in their seats. Some people were checking out. Some people were frightened. And there was something inside me that welled up, and it said, I must stop this now. This is not good for anybody. It's not only not good for the folks that are listening, but it actually was not good for the elder demonstrating the behavior either. And so I found the courage, and just so you know, courage is doing something and feeling your fear. And not to get courage, when I ask people to develop courage, it's not doing something in the absence of fear. It's actually doing it in the face of your own fear and feeling your fear. So I was fearful, I was nervous, but I was able to muster up my courage. I walked across the room and very directly and kindly and respectfully told him that he must stop now. And what happened next was something that had never happened before. He left, and after he left, the group began to talk about how this happens all the time. Different folks got to share how they feel about it. Different perspectives were shared around it. And there was this sense of relief in the system that something different had happened, a change had occurred. And there were questions about respect and how do we honor the tradition of respecting our elders when an elder is being abusive. And that is a really good discussion that needs to be had. But most importantly, what needs to happen next is we need to actually find a way to bring that voice of that elder in a more respectful way. And that might require us to work with that person separately first. But if we don't create space for the marginalized voice, the voice that either feels sad or frustrated or withdrawn, we're not having shared viewpoints, shared perspectives, we're not able to have the kinds of discussions that we need to have that are inclusive and that lead us to the places of creativity and problem solving and finding the solutions that are going to be sustainable for our communities. And we will continue to have conversations where we recycle around and it feels like nothing's ever changing. So notice who might be the marginalized voice in your system, in your family, and find a way to help that person express themselves, um, get their message out, and then work with the message and be able to sit together and be with those difficult conversations. It's so very important to the evolution of our communities and to our adaptation to an ever-changing world, and our survival, really. Have a great week.